Ladies and gentlemen, we've got more major stuff, major realignment breaking intel on this Friday. We've got a brand new tweet that says, what's the latest in realignment? Why an ACC Pac-12 arrangement isn't happening. So guys, this is major news. The past few days, we've had multiple people very optimistic about the Pac-12 and the ACC possibly going into some sort of an alliance, but this very reputable source says that is not happening. And guys, I've been frustrated with multiple paywalls, but this paywall was placed a little bit too low, and I actually clicked on the article, and you can see in the second half of the second paragraph, it says there's little chance of this happening. Meaning, according to sources, the idea of the Pac-12 and the ACC forming some sort of an alliance, which I had always speculated was just a Hail Mary attempt by the Pac-12 to save their conference. Apparently, that is not happening, and it wouldn't make any sense for the ACC to go into an alliance with the Pac-12 because apparently, if the ACC decides to do this, they would be reopening negotiations for their TV contract, which would then enable Clemson, Florida State, Miami to potentially leave the ACC for the Pac-12 and not face any exit fee. Because right now, if a team like Clemson wanted to join the SEC, they're signed into a contract through 2036. There'd be a major fee. Now, Clemson still might just leave anyways and pay the fee, or they might challenge it in court. But even if they paid the fee, you're going to make so much more money in the SEC than you would in the ACC. They might leave anyways. But this makes no sense. The idea of an agreement or some sort of an alliance between the Pac-12 and the ACC makes no sense for the ACC. It would only be benefiting the Pac-12 as they desperately try and claw and keep their conference together. But I had speculated, I thought this was a Hail Mary attempt, even though there was a writer from The Atlantic that said he thought this is what was going to happen. We are getting this intel. This is extremely reputable. It's not happening, just like I thought. It's not happening. An ACC Pac-12 alliance. This was probably something that was brought up by the Pac-12, I would guess. There's no reason for the ACC to do this unless even if there was an imminent threat of teams leaving, this would only expedite that process because if the ACC joins an agreement with the Pac-12, it would reopen negotiations, which would allow Clemson to leave the ACC. So the ACC does not want to do this at all. And it says, what could the ACC do to create revenue? I'm guessing that's in reference to the unequal revenue sharing thing that the ACC has talked about, where you give Clemson more money and a team like Wake Forest less money as an incentive for Clemson to stay in the conference and not bolt to the SEC. It would be some sort of revenue structure. Clemson gets more, Miami gets more, Florida State gets more. The teams that get better ratings, that bring in more revenue to the conference, would get more money, and they'd be taking that money from teams like Wake Forest and Boston College and NC State and teams like that. So that's what I'm guessing that's referencing. What's the Big 12's next move? We'll talk about that in a second. If Notre Dame ever left, and it won't be soon. Guys, this is like the fourth straight update I've heard on Notre Dame where I've heard very reputable sources saying if Notre Dame goes to the Big Ten or the SEC or any conference, it's not going to happen soon. So the idea that the Big Ten is going to wait for Notre Dame, the Big Ten could be at 16 teams for multiple years because there is a rumor that Notre Dame isn't even going to consider joining a conference until 2025. And this is multiple people that are saying Notre Dame is fine with just sitting and waiting and seeing what happens with the Big 12 and the Pac-12. Who goes with Notre Dame? I'm guessing that's in reference to maybe the Big Ten taking Stanford with Notre Dame, or maybe Virginia, North Carolina, and another team from the ACC. But there's this idea that the Big Ten would take Stanford as another academic power, as another way to entice Notre Dame, where Notre Dame and Stanford would go to the Big Ten. That would expand the league to 18 teams. Of course, they could also take Oregon and Washington, but those two teams aren't going to really entice the Big Ten because they're not going to bring in more revenue to the conference, where Notre Dame most certainly will. Most certainly will. And then it says most likely college football playoff option. So right now, guys, my speculation, I think they're going with the 12-team playoffs starting in 2026, no matter how the super conferences shake out. There's this idea that there could be an exclusive playoff with just the SEC and the Big Ten. I did a video on it maybe a week ago. I think it's just ridiculous. If these teams want to make more money, they want more revenue. That's the reason all this realignment is happening in the first place. Make more important games towards the end of the year. Make every New Year's Six game extremely meaningful. You have a 12-team playoff. You have multiple on-campus games, which will only help certain schools that make the playoff. It'll help their revenue. It doesn't water down the regular season at all. You think the NFL regular season gets watered down because the number one seeds in each conference lose 4 games? That's ridiculous. This idea that in college football, if you lose once, you're done, I think that's so stupid. Now, I agree, you shouldn't go 6-6 and have a chance at a national title, but there should be a playoff expanded to 12 teams, give the first 4 seeds buys, so you still incentivize being one of those elite top 4 teams. That is the structure I think they go with. It makes sense from a revenue standpoint. It makes sense competitively. It makes actually more games meaningful because more teams and more schools are going to think they have a chance at the playoff. Imagine if we had a 12-team playoff this year. You've got a team like Utah, who would basically probably be in. USC under Lincoln Riley in their first year, they would be in. Texas with Quinn Ewers might be in. It would make college football a lot more fun, and you'd still give those first 4 teams auto buys. So I think we are expanding to a 12-team playoff starting in 2026. And if it comes down to money, it comes down to money, and you're going to make way more money and way more revenue having on-campus games. You're going to get more ratings, which is going to give you more ad dollars. It makes complete sense to me. But we've got some major tweets here. This is from yesterday. Not much chatter yet today, but that's not unusual. It's been a very busy past few days, and a quiet period like this is good. It means no one is jumping the gun. The only juicy thing I've heard today is that Utah may be waffling on their Big 12 application. Only Utah. This is really fascinating to me, and I tried to think why Utah would be, if you're Utah and you know Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado are joining the Big 12, why would you stay on a sinking ship in the Pac-12? Utah has to realize if those 3 teams leave the Big 12, Washington and Oregon are guaranteed gone, and that's the total just complete elimination of the conference if those 5 teams leave. So if you're Utah, very surprising. I do not know a logical good reason for why Utah would basically stay on a sinking ship if they know Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State are leaving for the Big 12. Obviously, Oregon is not going to stay in the conference at that point. Now you've lost 5 teams total. You're going to have to replace them with teams from the Mountain West if you even want to have a Big 12 conference. At that point, you're looking at Fresno State. You're looking at San Diego State. You're looking at Boise State, maybe Wyoming, teams like that. So really no clue on this. Big 12 could end up with a deal that pays all member schools well over $40 million per year without any more additions. And the additions, if the Big 12 gets more schools from the Pac-12, that's not going to up the revenue. What it does is it makes sure it ensures your conference is going to be relevant, and it ensures you're the 3rd most powerful conference. Adding schools from the Pac-12 like Arizona, Arizona State, even Oregon or Washington, it's not going to up your revenue a ton. That's not why you do it. You do it to make sure you have the 3rd most powerful conference in college football and you remain relevant. and it looks like they're making over $40 million per year now. The numbers we've heard from the Big Ten and the SEC are well over $100 million, so over double that. If that's why Oregon wants to go to the Big Ten and not the Pac-12, because they'd be making over double. And so that's a crazy. I mean, $40 million is still great, but you want to add teams from the Pac-12 not for revenue, but to remain relevant. That's the whole idea behind it. Utah hasn't withdrawn their application, but they do seem less urgent and seem to be teetering. Guys, I don't know what to make of this. My only thought is maybe Utah knows that also Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State don't want to leave, but this report is saying only Utah. So the other three are ready to go. If I'm Utah, you need to leave the sinking ship. Don't stay on the sinking ship. Leave. Washington and Oregon are not staying in the Big 12 if those other three schools leave the the Pac-12. Washington and Oregon, they're not staying in the Pac-12 if Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado leave, because then you have 5 teams now to replace, obviously, USC, UCLA. There's no way you're going to field a competitive conference that would be something that entices Oregon and Washington to stay when they're trying to be competitive in the college football landscape. Looks like the future for some conferences is something the Big 12 already know doesn't work. Unequal revenue sharing. So this is a total shot at the ACC. The Pac-12 is exploring it in their negotiations, and now ACC is considering doing it to keep current contract to try and keep some of their schools happy. I don't think I read that correctly, honestly. One thing I will share this morning before I'm off to work. This is this morning. This was a few hours ago. Not a single Big 12 AD or executive working in Big 12 offices will be taking a day off over the weekend. Guys, the Big 12 wants this done, and they want it done soon. But the intel we just received, maybe it's only 3 teams. Maybe it's only Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado, and not Utah. I don't know what Utah plans to do. Do they want to go independent? No clue. If you know those other 3 teams are leaving, don't stay on the sinking ship. Don't stay in the Pac-12 at that point. It makes no sense. It'll be really interesting, and you guys can see this is the Colorado board. You can see upcoming meetings and event. They've got a special board meeting. It's a session from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock this afternoon, so they are still meeting every day with people in the Big 12, possibly looking at negotiations to join their conference. So this is major stuff, guys. It'll be very interesting. Once again, the major news today, the whole alliance between the Pac-12, the ACC, it's not happening. Not happening. Didn't make sense from the beginning. And also, could Utah be not wanting to, for whatever reason, don't want to join the Big 12 with the other 3 rumored Pac-12 teams? And then you also have Oregon and Washington, who would probably join the Big 12 if they are not going to get in to the Big 10 or the SEC. Realistically, I think we're at kind of a standstill because Notre Dame's doesn't want to make their decision right now. So realistically, I think the Big 10 is going to be stuck at 16 teams. The SEC is not expanding unless the Big 10 expands, in my opinion. Now, maybe they want to expand anyways and force the Big 10 to, but right now the SEC and Big 10 are happy with 16 teams. The Big 12 is on the verge of getting to either 15 or 16 teams, depending on what Utah wants to do, and you're talking about the Pac-12 losing everyone. And then the next question becomes, what happens to Oregon and Washington? Are they able to get a spot in the Big 10 or the SEC, or do they have to settle for a potential Big 12 super conference? If they both join the Big 12, that would expand to possibly 20 teams total. And that would make the Big 12 the 3rd best conference in college football. We've heard nothing but aggression from the Big 12 and their conference. They want these teams. They want to get it done. They want to make sure they're the 3rd most powerful conference in college football going forward. I mean, we'll continue to follow that situation. It'll be interesting. But guys, make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.